Okay, welcome back to Cool Club's headquarters here in Scottsdale. Today we're super lucky to have Kim Brayley, the Director of R&D and the Tour Department at KBS Golf Shafts. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
We have you around a lot, which is great. So
Yes.
hopefully we get to talk about a lot more in the coming months and hopefully years. But let's start off with your story. I'm not sure how many people know the origins of KBS or you, and I just want people to start there, and then we'll build up. So, how did you get into the golf shaft industry?
Well, I mean, KBS is just the latest 10 years, and I've been involved in it for for over 30. Um, I got involved with it I love golf. Like a lot of us, at one point, I thought I was going to be a tour player, and at one point, I knew that was that's where I was headed, and I really love the game. But the thing that got me into this is my father.
Quick going back. When did you start playing golf?
I started when I was 13, which would have been around 69,
And whereabouts in the country?
uh, outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, cool. Anywhere that anyone would know, like the home golf course?
No, the home course I wouldn't know, but it was, so many. I was just outside of Philly, outside of Wilmington, Delaware. Actually, the course they're playing the FedEx this week.
This week, yeah.
Wilmington, it was part of our suburban league, so that was a course I played pretty regularly.
Awesome.
Like all the metropolitan areas, there's just a ton of great golf courses that people never heard of, but and Wilmington is one of those.
Did you get yourself down? What was your handicap, your best handicap?
I was plus when I was a kid.
Oh, cool.
So,
Awesome.
and, you know how it is. You're really 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 good at your home course and the courses that you play fairly regularly, and until you play with really really good players, you really don't know.
Yeah, you get wake up calls.
I was lucky to qualify for a tournament in Philadelphia, the IVB Classic, when I was 17, and I got a chance to see the difference between where I was, which I thought I was a superstar, and where everybody else was, and I realized that I had a long way to go.
Oh, it's time to get into the equipment industry. That's what.
Yes, I wasn't quite there yet, but I realized that I wasn't. I certainly wasn't working hard enough.
Yeah. So how did you get into the equipment industry?
Okay, my dad started a wedge company when I was in high school. He was a veterinarian. He was a large animal vet. He always liked golf equipment. He's an aeronautical engineer, and what he did is he combined some of the things he knows in aeronautics with a wedge, and it was called the console wedge. You may or may not have heard it. It was
No, I haven't seen
a
it.
long time ago. And anyway, so when I was in high school in the summers, and I used to build a lot of wedges, and that's how we got started. Um, Later on, my dad developed a golf club called a Dynaphase, and it was a club that was made out of it was a titanium body iron with a cavity back and tungsten weights. And this was something that back then it wasn't done by anybody. And while I'm telling this story, this is how we got into frequency matching. Um, we had made some clubs that we checked the moment both horizontal and vertically. We checked the weight of the grips. I checked the weight of the tape. I mean, I did everything back then. I mean, we checked everything. And
What shafts are you putting in these?
it was a Dynamic X,
Okay.
and it was actually an over the hosel shaft. The first heads that we designed were actually were over the hosels.
So like bell diameters on
Uh-huh.
Right.
Uh-huh. And anyway, so like I said, we were doing some testing, and we had rented the unit from Wilson in West Palm, which was the only iron barn at that time that was really available for people like us to be able to go and use. I believe Titleist had one, but it wasn't available. Anyway, so we made these two clubs up identically, and then we made several other clubs, moving the weight around to be able to determine what happens. But in order to do the test, you have to have a master. So when these two clubs that were identical acted so entirely different, it just threw my dad and I for a loop. We needed a master. We needed something. We needed a place to start from where we knew that we were starting from the same place, and we needed to know that we could go from one club to another, and the change be made by what's going on with the golf club head. And anyway, so we scratched our heads a bit. We did a lot of testing that day with moving the weight around, and we found some things out. One of the things we found out was that the iron bind didn't necessarily swing exactly the same way a human did, but For contact, it was very good, and we learned quite a bit. And I was doing a lot of traveling at that time, and this was shortly before I was going somewhere. And anyway, my dad and I were on our way home. We had driven all the way down there, and he said, "You know what? It's the shafts." And we started thinking about it, and we talked about it the whole way home. And I went away, and sometime later, my dad invented frequency matching. And about 3 years later, I got a call, and he said, it wasn't a call. Back then, you didn't call. I think it was a telex. But basically, it was, he said something along the lines of, it's time to stop contemplating your navel and come to work. And he said, I need you. So I came to work for him, and my job was to learn the frequency matching part of it. My dad had invented the process, but he was having a hard time explaining to the engineering people that he was working with. Them not having a golfing background probably hurt. But anyway, he was having a hard time communicating with them, and we always communicated well, so that's one of the reasons why he wanted me to come home.
So was the issue being able to, like, you all of a sudden you understand that these golf shafts aren't consistent with each other, but then the issue is, well, how do you make them consistent?
Yeah, so what I do is go straight to the library and start learning about these things. I knew very, very little. At that point in time, there was a dynamic shaft, and there was an apex shaft, and there wasn't a whole lot more. There were a few other shafts that would be used for, cheap shafts, less expensive golf clubs and what have you. But there wasn't a lot of variety out there. Brunswick had a shaft called Propel, which was the same as a dynamic, and so like I said, there wasn't a lot to choose from. And we had no idea of the importance of the shaft at that time. When you had I'm sure that you had this. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had a favorite club, and I thought there was something magic about that head. I would look at that head, and I would think, there's just something there about the way it was forged, or whatever. There was something magic about that head. Never thinking that the shaft had that much to do with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how it started. It all started with us trying to experiment with some heads that we thought were identical and had entirely different. They had entirely different reaction on an iron bar than what we would have hoped they had.
So your dad had some background, obviously, especially with making the wedges. He's involved in golf. You wanting to be a player, like, what was your schooling background that allowed you to kind of move into the shaft piece?
Well, I was always really good in physics and mathematics, and I was fast tracked and everything. So I was inclined in terms of doing those type of things, and I was always pretty good in physics and mathematics.
So then you start producing more consistent quality golf shafts, and this number gets tighter.
Yeah, well, you know what it was? At first, it was just trying to decide and understand what we were doing. I went to the library at the University of Pennsylvania, which I'd been using for a few years, and there was nothing there on steel golf shafts. Nothing. There was quite a bit on hickory.
Okay.
I learned it. That was interesting. There was a lot of things on. After I went home, I started thinking of other things I could study that that I could pick up things. Things like flagpoles, believe it or not, ship mast, several tubular structures that transmit energy. That there was things I could study, but.
Well, I guess that is a big difference, right? There's two things. There's tubular objects, and then there's ones that transfer energy, and some of those tubular things have got nothing to do with movement, right? They're just there.
So it was pretty easy to So I'm not telling you that there was 100 different things I studied. There was only a handful, but my learning was through trial and error. It was empirical in 100%. What I did find is a lot of the things that we thought were absolutely in reverse of what actually really happened when you could actually measure them. Things like when you make a golf club longer, we used to think it became weaker. Well, no, it depends on where you make it longer from. If you make it longer from the butt, it's the strongest part of the shaft. You add to the strongest part of something, you don't make it weaker. It's just not possible. So anyway, we learned quite a few things, and in fact, there was Ralph Maltby had a book out. It was pretty much the Bible, and still is.
Yeah, I've read that.
And, we all did. We all did. We had to start somewhere, and that was a good place. like I said, so much of the stuff that we have has been handed down from generation to generation as far as club makers are concerned, and a lot of it just wasn't true, and it seemed to make sense to the player, and that's another problem we have. Players think that they know more a lot about, they tend to think they know the reasons why things are going on, and it's not always the case.
So give us some experience on that, because now you've got evidence that you can make a product different and better potentially, and then you've all of a sudden got all these feelings and shots that you want to put in against that. Like, how did you marry those two together to start creating ball flights?
Well, okay, now that's way later. We're at a point now that we have to determine what it is that we're doing. We have to take the frequency matching concept and put it into we have to apply it.
Actually, before we go past that, give everyone the rawest example or the best definition you can of frequency. Like, what's the most simple way to break that down?
How it works?
Yeah, like length. How did you come up with that length versus CPM? And
well, we had to come up with all the variations of different lengths and what happens to golf clubs when you build them. But a frequency meter basically is nothing more than you lock the butt end of the shaft, so the butt's secure. You put a weight on the tip, you load it, you pull it down, let it go. The faster it oscillates, the faster it moves, the stiffer it is. And you have a meter that measures it in cycles per minute. And what that does, it allows you to categorize the shaft in very, very tight windows in terms of the stiffness. And so what we did was, and I'll just go into the manufacturing of it a little bit. What we would do is we would design the shafts to hit a certain frequency. Once we, that came just a little while down. But when we got there, what we would do is we'd freak all the shafts at the same length, the same pattern, into half cycle increments, and so all the sets within all the shafts within a set would come from the same half cycle increment. Virtually impossible to tell a difference.
Yeah.
Consequently, the weights were pretty close, but the fact is they were in motion the same stiffness.
Yes.
And then we had to decide what was the correct increment in terms of how much stiffer each shaft should be. In order for the thing about matching clubs is you want to be able to put the shaft in the same. The shaft should have the same amount of bend to it or the same amount of straightness all the way throughout the set. That's what makes the set matched. And the reason why people have clubs that they prefer is because you've heard this comment that they're able to square them better, and that's the whole idea, is to be able to square the entire set the same, get rid of their favorite club type syndrome. Which when we first got started, and I'm all over the place, guys, but what my dad and I did in trying to figure out how to make this thing work, we had a way to measure shafts, and we knew it was better than anything out there. But there was a lot of things we needed to learn. We needed to learn what the proper stiffness between each shaft should be. Mathematically, that was pretty easy because we learned what length meant, and we learned what weight meant in terms of frequency. So we were able to come up with what we thought it should be mathematically pretty without a great deal of difficulty. But then taking that and putting it into practice doesn't always work.
Well, then you've got two different things. Again, you've got the speed that it's being moved at, or the way it's being moved with those ranges, right? So you've got to marry those two together at some point.
Yeah. Hey, listen. When you're starting from nothing, there's so much you have to do. And that was a big part of it. What we did was we raised a few $1 million, which was a lot of money back then, and we got a trailer.
This is what I wanted to get into, tour van.
Okay.
The beginning of the tour
so
van.
we're trying to figure this thing out, man.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of good players, and Buddy Marucci, Siegel, Dean Beeman would come up, Bert Yancey. We had Arnold. We had a lot of good players to contribute, but, my dad said, let's find out. Dean was the commissioner then. We had a great relationship with Dean. Dean used to play our console wedge. And so anyway, Dean gave us permission to follow the tour around. And we had the same credentials that the tour players had. It was fantastic. This is like 79, give or take a year.
Are you guys the only guys out there?
We're the only guys out there. And, so the players would look back, and there's a trailer at the end of the range, and they're like, what the hell's going on? This thing says precision shaft on the side. So the next thing you know, these guys were walking in. And we weren't there to do anything but try to educate people. We were trying. This was our R&D. This is all this was. This was money put aside to do R&D, and we felt the best way to do that was to follow the PGA Tour and to get the feedback from those guys.
Yeah.
We tried to do it at home, and we felt like we were doing as well as we could, but we weren't going as fast as we'd like to. So we figured that the best way to do it was to do it with the best players. And they all showed up at the same place at the same time. So,
Yeah.
and
Captive
like I said,
audience right there.
Yeah, it was good. And the guys were so interested in doing it. It's nothing like it is today. These guys were lined up. They were interested.
Well, it directly is going to have an ability to make them play better golf, right?
Yep. And they realized that we were sincere about it. And they realized that we were trying. We weren't pushing something. We were trying to learn. Just,
Yeah. Well, that's a really nice point, that maybe gets skewed as the years go on.
Yeah.
But your heart was in it. You're trying to actually make a product that helps these guys play better.
And the relationships that that grew out of that were probably the most amazing thing when you look back on it.
Yeah.
I as a kid, I remember the first time I had to give a golf club to Arnold Palmer. I mean, that was a wedge, and I was probably 15. And I had met players and everything, but I never met Arnold. And so my dad gave me a club to give to him, and I run down and give the club to him, and we're standing on a cart path that had railroad ties as the borders, and he takes a look at the club, and man, I probably used a half quart of friggin' acetone cleaning this thing up, and the first thing he does is he takes it above his head and he just whaps the shit of it on one of these railroad ties, and I'm just you can imagine, and he puts it back down again, and he looks at me and he puts his hand on my head and shakes my hair and everything. He said, "That's perfect." And I go running back to the trailer, and my dad explains to me what happened.
Yeah.
So
he's adjusting the lie angle.
Yeah, he was adjusting the lie angle. And he was one of the few people. No, I wouldn't say few people. A lot of people didn't know as much about. He knew a lot about equipment.
Yeah.
He was a tinkerer, and I'm not going to say he knew more about anybody, but he knew a lot about equipment.
Okay. And that's great. I mean, they're the guys you want to drive. Do you think that still rings true today? Do you think that it's important to learn from the tour guys, or do you like taking it more to the the average golfer market?
I've been accused of touring, designing golf shafts for tour players my whole life, and I'll be honest with you, the majority of has been directed towards the best players. Mm-hmm. For so many years, the most important thing was to get players playing your stuff.
Into your stuff, yeah.
That would be the first question an OEM would ask. You go into an OEM, they want to know, hey, what's new and who's playing it. So, it was very, very, very important to have tour results.
Well, I guess the nice thing, talking with TK as well, is that the ladies' tours opened up so much, and their golf speed is much more relative to your average golfer, and they do get the exposure. So,
yep. So, what's happened there, and we're just jumping all over, but what's happened there during COVID, we had a lot of ladies in here. I do all of my research here at Cool Clubs. They have a lot of equipment that nobody else has, and in terms of being able to measure golf shafts, and anyway, it's a perfect situation for me. And Tom TK, the guy you hear us talking about, he teaches a lot of the girls, and we have a ton of them in the valley here. And so during COVID, and after that, when things were slowed down, we were working almost exclusively with the girls. And we were developing products at that time that were their swing speeds. We were finishing up the matrix for the graphite, and developed the PGI, which is the graphite shaft that's for the I want to say normal swing speeds. These are the swing speeds that a lot of people are getting fitted into.
Yep.
The 80 mile an hour 6-irons, low 90s. Good players, but not necessarily tour players.
Yeah.
And working almost exclusively with the ladies for the past couple of years allowed us to really nail this down. I mean, what we did with the PGI and the Tour Light, working with the girls, allowed us to. And by the way, the girls are wonderful to work with. I mean, they show up on time. They actually have an appointment. And they're thankful. You're
I
here.
get it.
You,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
you know what I'm talking about. And anyway, so that was great. But and working with them, it was very, very easy. They're so appreciative. They don't tend to have this nearly the amount of preconceived notions that the guys do.
Yeah.
A lot of working with guys is trying to explain something to them that they don't quite understand, and them being the player that they are, they tend to think they know a lot more than they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to, get true feedback when it's masked by some other information.
Absolutely. When you have a bias or whatever, it's tough. It's tough.
As you've, hate to say it, as you've got older, have you moved with the equipment? I guess when you started, you've had 120 gram plus shafts, and now what have you got in your bag now?
Oh yeah, me. Yeah, right now I have 110 gram S tapers. They work great, and I'm trying the PGIs. And I'm not playing a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, the shafts that I'm playing now are nothing like I would have been playing 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good though. Like, and you've
Well,
had part of that experiment.
Again, we're all over the place. But what's happening, and I've embraced it full on the past 10 years, and really hard the past 5, is trying to get people away from making buying decisions about PGA Tour players. I mean, if a PGA Tour player buys something, or a PGA Tour player is playing something, and especially a shaft, that's not what you want to play.
It's not even the 1% stuff.
No, I mean it's so far and away out of the question. It's not even funny, and for some reason the Asians, especially the Japanese, have been looking towards the ladies tour for a long time, as you know, doing fitting.
And the whole market when you buy a Japanese golf club, it often comes with a lighter weight golf shaft in it. They're aware that this is normal.
And it's where it's going. It's going here now too. I mean, all of the stuff off the rack is lightweight now. It's what we would consider lightweight. I'm not sure. I think 115 was really lightweight at one time, and 115 is pretty normal these days.
Yeah, I'd say that's why I think you're bang on. 110, 115 is that mid range.
110, 115. I think in your business is pretty close to the sweet spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in steel. Mm-hmm. I'm talking steel iron shafts.
For sure. I mean, we touched on this with TK too, of like what is the sweet spot out there on the LPGA tour right now, and he's talking 80 grams, 90 grams being that he's seen the girls transition from those 100 grammers and all of a sudden making better golf swings, getting better ball flights with these lighter weight products that you guys are starting to produce there.
Yeah, but in the process of developing these shafts, and what we did is we would optimize a shaft at a specific speed, and we determine what the speed should be by the weights, what people preferred to go to at different speeds. We with all the data that you guys have here, and that's one of the beautiful things. I mean, just reams. I mean, just so much data. So we were able to see where at certain speeds where people go in terms of weights and what have you. And then of course you know what your weight ranges are. The speeds that you're hitting for this particular product would be from 82 to 72, let's say.
Yeah.
Throwing something out there. So, and the weights are 90 to 50. So you look at that, and you start looking at what the speed should be. And then you go out and start testing it, and you find out what the speeds actually are.
Yes.
And luckily, we bracket our shafts in a way that if one doesn't fit you, depending on which way you're going to go, more than likely the one on either side will. Provided you were hitting you were putting the ballpark to begin with.
When did that concept come in? Because I think that's one of the biggest things with KBS that I see is whenever weight changes, flex change. It goes together.
Okay, now I didn't realize it, but when we started this whole frequency matching thing, we were fitting people.
Yeah.
I didn't know it,
yeah.
but that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say I've never designed a golf shaft that wasn't designed for a specific group of people.
Yeah.
I've never threw shit. I don't put stuff on the wall and see
hope it sticks.
No, we don't do that. We have a mission. We want to address this. And that's why there's so many variations of different shafts that we have on the higher ranges. Is because of all the different things tour players may tend to need to do. And generally what you do is you find out what a person's tendencies are, and then you design around that so that you make the tendencies that they have that are poor less likely to happen.
Okay. Yep.
By either manipulating the flex point a little bit or the overall stiffness.
Yeah. So that's the thing I think is the biggest. It's hard to explain, but instead of a company saying, okay, we've got a 120 R, S, and X, your 120 is the S, for instance, and then the 110 is the R and the 130 is the X. But if you want to change the stiffness, you're actually changing the whole style of the golf shaft. So yes. A 120 Tour versus a 120 Tour V, that's really your jump.
Yes.
The 120 Tour V is an X.
Yeah. Yes.
So you dance around the flex issue with the style of golf shaft.
We tried I can't tell you how many times we've tried to get rid of the RS and X, and it's just something we can't do. As you know, an X flex in a lightweight shaft is not as many times, it's not even as stiff as an R flex in a regular weight.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But the guy feels good because he's swinging an X, and anyway. But yeah, the RS and X thing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to us. The lucky thing with our graphite, we were able to start with a clean slate from the very, very beginning and just make a fitting matrix right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And that's what we did from driver to wedge. There was a time when we thought fitting, if you were a 5.5, you were a 5.5 all the way
just
through.
Across the board.
That made sense to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we didn't really go into the things about when a person tees the ball up, they really don't have quite the same swing that they do when there's things that happen that necessarily weren't what we were thinking about.
And you could not have predicted the jump in technology over those 20 years of how light these golf shafts can get and how strong they can play, right?
No. The graphite, especially with drivers and woods, I mean, all across the board, but what we're able to do with drivers in terms of lengths. I mean, we were 43 inches, we were fine, but then the graphites came along, and so much of this is driven by the OEMs and what they want to sell.
Well, and also driven by the OEMs designing heads. Like it's okay to play a 43-inch driver when the head weighs X. Nowadays they weigh nothing, and you play at 43 inches, you don't even know what you got in your hand.
So what happened was the OEMs got into a war of distance. It was all if we want to talk about a driver, let's say. And what happened with the technology. As the technology grew, it gave the OEMs the ability to do different things, not just smoke and mirrors, to really, really do different things that, in some cases were quantum leaps. But, surely, when the graphite shafts came along, it opened up a lot. And, in steel, I firmly believe that for players that are able to move it, there's nothing better than steel for an iron golf shaft. I just think that it's just the right material, it's the right weight.
When you say move it, you mean they're moving at a decent pace?
Yes, yeah. But quite frankly, when we get down into those sub 90 gram weights, we can't make a steel shaft stable enough for someone who swings it. Anything other than really, really, really slow.
Yeah.
And that, you may design something for somebody, and everybody ends up hitting it. But the graphite did open up a lot on not just the driver shafts, but in being able to stabilize shafts that are lighter.
Yeah, I love graphite. Nowadays, being able to give a guy a 50, 60 gram iron shaft, the longevity, he can play into his 80s, maybe even later, and not feel burned out, swinging a heavy golf shaft all day long.
We did it somehow. We made it work back in the days, and I don't know that golfers are any older today. Maybe they are.
Yeah.
But there's that's one of the quantum leaps over the past 30 years, most certainly.
Yeah. I really want to dig into. Actual designing of products, like some of the methods you go through at a later date.
Yeah. Well, maybe next time we'll go through it a little bit more chronologically and go through what happened after Precision and then Brunswick and then Rifle and then Royal Precision and then KBS.
Hopefully everyone loves. I mean, I find it fascinating just listening to your stories, and I'm sure we'll pick out some. You know, the lines were going the right way, like we're working the right way. But you know, we'll touch back on that real quick. So it really was Precision.
Yes, Precision Shaft, and then we got bought by Brunswick, and then we were purchased by a group of people, and we became Rifle, and then we acquired Royal Grip. This group wanted to become a major player in the golf industry, and they had designs on buying head companies and barrel companies and all this kind of thing. So anyway, we bought Royal Grip out here in Scottsdale, and actually that's what brought me here to Scottsdale is when Precision bought or Rifle, whatever we were called, Rifle. When we purchased Royal Grip, that's what brought me in our sales, R&D, and a little bit of our mainly it was sales, R&D, and marketing came from Connecticut out here to Scottsdale, and that's what brought me here.
Awesome. Which
was great. I mean, that was the best move for me because, it put me in the middle. When I moved here, there were like 150 or 100, maybe it was more than that of card holders. I mean, real card holders. We're not talking about, we're talking about real card holders, people that were top 125 on the PGA Tour, that people were top 100 on the LPGA, top 100 on the senior. These were real card holders, and I want to say that there was about 150 of them. So, anyway, it was that was a really, really big move for me, and that turned out to be really, really, really positive in terms of what I've been able to do.
And then KBS evolved from that.
Yes, KBS evolved from that several years later.
Yeah, and that was you walking out on your own saying,
well, man, there's so much. True Temper purchased the shaft company that Rifle became, which was Royal Precision, and I had worked in this industry my entire life, and I was ready for a little bit of a break. So I took a break, and then I was contacted by Larry Bodle, and he asked me, what I was doing, and I told him I was playing golf, and he asked me if I had any interest to go to work for a company called FST in Taiwan. And I asked around a little bit, and at first my interest wasn't that great. Their reputation wasn't good. They were a pretty small company, but anyway, as a few months went by, it just seemed like it was a really good opportunity. They were pretty persistent, and anyway, it ended up being probably it's without a doubt the biggest things I've ever done. I mean, this was a very small company with a very, very bad reputation, and it now is the second largest steel golf shaft, or second largest, golf shaft company in the world. So
it did okay.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, we're very, very, very proud of that. And in the end, no telling where that one's going to go. So.
Well, and we're all thankful for it because it allows us to do a good job.
Well, you know what it did too? It at the time there was a little bit of a stranglehold. I'm not going to say there was a monopoly, but there wasn't a lot of players in the steel golf shaft business.
Yeah.
And anyway, so.
Well, we all know that growing up, there was an option and there was no other option. That was about it.
It's good to have options, and like I said, I'm just so happy that the growth of the game's in fitting. It's where it should be. We want players to play better, and the thing that keeps people out of this game is they get frustrated, and if we can just do something to help people play a little bit better, more people are going to play the game and
enjoy it.
And that's what it's all about. And quite frankly, we are just so fortunate that we were able to do something our entire lives that we love, and
I agree. There's plenty worse places to be 9 to 5.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll wrap it up this time. We can talk all day, but thank you so much, mate. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers.
Thanks, Zach.